So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. I'm on the shorter quick fire questions version of the podcast. This week I'm joined by Mary Martha, who is an American who lives in Chile. We've just finished recording the kind of longer full-length version. If you haven't seen it yet, please do go watch it after this. I'm sure there's a link by my finger somewhere here where you can go and see that podcast if you're watching on YouTube, or you can find it on however you're listening to this. Mary Martha, this is roughly where I just ask some very light-hearted questions. The first question I always go with is, what's your favourite place you've ever lived?
Well, I've lived just a few, so it's not that hard for me to choose. I guess, from the US, I would have to go with Santiago. Santiago is just really, it's kind of, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's very cold. It's cold for like 8 months of the year, and Santiago is very Mediterranean. So there's 4 seasons. You're the mountains, you're an hour from the ocean, hour from the mountains. So that's pretty awesome.
That's a perfect place to live. I'm jealous now.
It is. Well, anytime.
I will do. What's your favourite international food?
Well, I really like sushi. I also like Peruvian food. I know I'm kind of cheating because I'm just giving you like a genre of food. But yeah, I would say that right now, Peruvian food, ceviche.
And what about it is so good? Is it the flavors? Is it the way it's cooked? Is it the...
For the flavors, it's really interesting because there's like an Asian fusion to Peruvian food, and I think there's a stereotype about like a lot of Latin American countries that the food is spicy, at least in the US, because we're familiar with more Mexican food that is spicy, but food in Chile and other places in Latin America doesn't have spice to it, and so Peruvian food does have a little bit more spice compared to other Latin American foods. And just the seafood and the way that they use a lot of like flavor and spices, I like that. It's nice.
Wonderful. It sounds delicious. I'm getting hungry now. What's your favorite international tradition?
Okay, well, I think something that's interesting to me, being from the US, we don't have any international dance. Our national dance, because it's such a big country, and so being in a smaller country, it's kind of cool. They have a dance called La Cueca, and it's their national dance. And so for their Independence Day, which is September 18th and 19th, they all will dance it at kind of a fair, like kind of a county fair. They'll be dancing it and they'll listen to the music. So that's really cool because you don't see that a lot in the US, of like all the people from the US dancing one dance in the same traditional dress. It's not very common. So I like seeing that. I like seeing something that makes Chilean people proud to be Chilean and celebrating their culture through dance.
Well, yeah, so the Harlem Shake doesn't really count as a national dance.
I guess you could say line.
I guess the Charleston's an older one. But...
You could say line dancing, but I'm like, but then because the US is so big, it depends on where you are. New York City is going to say absolutely not, So yeah, it's hard. There's so many different subcultures, whereas in Chile, this is the Chilean dance. There's less people, so it's easier to discuss.
That's very true. Yeah, I guess there's no 4th of July dance.
Yeah,
I suppose.
exactly.
What's your favourite thing about living abroad?
I think my favorite thing about living abroad is like being able to kind of take what I like about US culture, and I guess it's maybe mixed to like being in an intercultural marriage now, is like what about we like, and my husband and I, about Chilean culture, and just kind of create our own kind of hybrid of them both. I guess more of an international mindset of like really feeling more like in every area of my life I've been able to be like, this is what I was taught, but then go through the process of like, do I actually think that? Do I want to do it that way, and doing things differently? And I find that people who live abroad or live in different countries kind of take that perspective on is a lot more, I don't know, I guess it's more like their own ideas, if that makes sense, not just doing everything the way just because in their country that's the way that it's done.
Yeah, I guess that's how we say progressive too, because you get that external influence and you start to go, well, actually, it's a better way of doing it. Or you might go, well, I prefer my older way because it's more comfortable for me, but I appreciate why you're doing that. So you then don't judge someone for doing it differently for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like be more tolerant and just open, I guess.
Wonderful. And what's your best homesickness remedy?
I think it really depends on maybe how deep the homesick is, like how intense the feeling is. But I think something helpful to remember is like to first connect. So like if, let's say you're feeling really homesick, like what can you do to connect with like your culture? Either be like making a food, calling a friend or family member back home, or like watching whatever the BBC kind of movies that are familiar to you, like do something that makes you feel a little bit comfort, and then explore whenever you're ready. You don't have to rush to this phase, but I think it's good with something like homesickness to kind of get a little bit outside of one's head at a certain point when the person is ready for that. And what I mean by that is like, for example, in Santiago, like I would go on a lot of hikes or I would walk around or I'd enjoy the weather, the nice weather year round that we can, or explore different parts of the city or try new food or go to a meet and greet and meet new people, like kind of connect with curiosity, I guess, and explore like what about where I'm living now I can't do back in my home country, and how can I kind of like take advantage of that to say like, yes, I'm homesick. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm homesick. I'm going to let myself like do something to kind of like acknowledge that. And I'm also going to make a little bit of space, however capable I am, to explore and with curiosity, like this cool new place that I am.
That's a really, really good point. And yeah, I guess the second part of your answer really expanded on that in terms of how can you use your current environment to support you going forward. Because if you do plan to live somewhere long term, it is something you may have to start to have those coping mechanisms, be that the exploration or the hikes or the familiarity with certain things, and it becomes your new home, I suppose, over time anyway. So.
Yeah, it takes time, but totally, absolutely.
Yeah, and then my next question is, what's the hardest thing about living abroad?
Hard to just pick one. There can be a lot. I think for me, it can be living really far away from people that I'm just really close to, and I don't want to like relocate to where they're living to be physically close to them, but just certain friends or family members where I would love to just be able to go to my sister's house if I'm having a bad day, and like you said, just like have a glass of wine, or just someone who just knows me so deep. Like I would just love to be able to just like have those moments, and just not having those moments, or have those moments like once a year, but there's like a week or 2 weeks. I think that's really, really tough, is like wanting to be close to them physically, but knowing like I don't want to actually like live there though. So it can be kind of like conflicting.
You need like teleportation needs to be a thing soon for it to be.
Yes, that's exactly what I need. I'm missing that.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way, don't worry. And even now, just to go on holiday, because when it starts raining in the UK, I kind of want to teleport somewhere warm. So, what's the best phrase you've learned whilst living abroad? I'm assuming it'd be in Spanish or even an English phrase, but like a phrase which has made you laugh or meant something to you?
That's a good question. Well, in Chile, they speak a lot of Chilean, like they speak a lot of their own slang, which isn't even Spanish. But they speak a lot of things that aren't really, probably shouldn't say on this podcast, but something that Chileans use a lot is the word huevón, which means like huevón, which they have their own way of spelling it, which is also a word in Spanish, but they use it as like an interchangeable word to say friend. It could mean like a good thing, or it could mean like friend, or it could mean like jerk, depending on the tone. That's kind of like very common in Chilean and like Spanish. So they use every other word. But I think a word that I think is like really cute that they have is cachai. They say cachai like, you know, like, and so they'll say those type of things. And I know I'm totally cheating this, but one that I think is actually in Spanish that I think has had the most effect on me is they say like tranquila or tranquilo, like be calm a lot. And you can see a lot of like Spanish speaking people saying that, because they really do have like an attitude of like more calmness to like kind of stressful situations, or don't worry, we'll figure this out. And they said that to me a lot in the beginning, and I was always so like high strung, like I am calm, this is me being calm. And so I realized like in the US, it's like culturally like we're more high strung, and their approach to like just be calm, like we got this. So I say just tranquila. It feels like comforting because it's like a way that they deal with stuff. They don't take things too seriously.
That's interesting. That's not my experience of my like Latin friends who are either Italian or Spanish in Europe. They're usually they flare up really quickly if they're very passionate about something. If it's an argument, or if it's like it's not calm. It's not calm at all. It's like but it's very short lived. It's like sizzles and then sizzles off something else. So it's quite interesting to see how maybe in Latin America it's different to Latin Europe.
Definitely. I think so. Yeah.
And then what's your best way of making new friends?
Just putting yourself out there a lot. And I read a quote once when I was looking for a job that says it takes like 100 no's to get to one yes. And I think that also applies to friends, especially like what we were talking about before as an adult, is it can feel really hard when you're used to having the friends that maybe you create in high school or university or work, and then you move abroad as an adult and it's like, wow, this takes so much effort. So like, it just is like consistency of just putting yourself out there and realize that you're probably going to get rejected a lot, but that doesn't mean anything like that you're not cool to hang around, that you're not like worthy of being someone's friend. It's part of the process of making friends as an adult, especially as an expat. So put yourself out there a lot, a lot, a lot. And it's okay to like just be open to like being friends with people who you just know aren't really your vibe, to just be around people and like be open, and I guess just hang in there. And it takes time to like really find your people.
I completely, yeah, that's a very, very good point of you have to build the deeper relationships more than you may have had to do before. It's all about quality time with people and having that connection. That's a very good point. What's the best thing to do in your new city?
I love like exploring a new city by walking, as long as that's safe and a person feels comfortable doing that. As long as you can kind of like, yeah, just some basic things. As long as you can feel safe and comfortable, and you're not drawing too much attention to yourself, like no flashy jewelry or anything. But I think like at the days that I was in Santiago, and I just spent around walking, like simple stuff, and just observing people and just kind of soaking it in is a nice thing to do, especially in a new city if a person has a lot of time to kill. And instead of maybe like rushing to the next place, like walk on a busy street and just, I don't know, because everything is different. I think that walking, and if possible, if a place has it, I think it's kind of cool to go like on a hike or do something nature-y, because that is also good for just mental health in general, just feeling better, just to get in nature a little bit. It can't hurt, but I do love like walking and just people watching kind of stuff.
Yeah, people watching for sure. It's one of my favorite things to do. Especially at train stations or like any like public transport place is a good place to have people watch. Is like a TripAdvisor top thing to do.
The thing is, I bet in Europe that it's a little bit more attractive, maybe because we don't really have train stations in Chile. Like there's not the train system that there is in Europe. So that sounds like a dream to do in Europe, but here I might not be as like attractive, maybe. But I don't know. I've never been to a lot of these places, so I'm just picking up a picture like that's really cool if you're somewhere that they have a train. But if they don't, maybe the bus, because the next thing is the bus stop, and the train seems a little bit cooler than the bus.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's probably my my European centric viewpoint of
All
things.
of it.
We see America is not being full of trains either, even though Amtrak is apparently really bad. But the Greyhound bus is worse apparently.
You have amazing train system. So cool. Absolutely. In Europe and in different places in the world, that sounds amazing.
Then my last question before I let you go is, what's your best expat life hack?
I would say just checking in with yourself each day. Like if I'm trying to think of like what a life hack, like something simple that you can actually just apply. I think there's so many challenges and it's so new. So if there could be something to check in with yourself before it kind of spirals into like, oh, like this is too much, can really be helpful, because it quickly, and it might sound something like, oh, I don't need to do that. But it's like after a few months of just trying to keep your, trying to navigate all these changes, it can quickly feel like too much. Practice, even if it's just like at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, you answer 3 questions in a journal. It doesn't have to be something fancy or long. I think also maybe writing something could be something helpful. Like journaling for me, it's been really helpful to look back on and to see your progress. Celebrating those small wins is really important, because if you don't teach your brain to catch on, you're just going to wait until the huge win, and it's going to feel like a year of failures, and that sucks. So do those things, because if you don't make it a habit, you're not going to do them.
Yeah, journaling really helped me quite a lot, especially when I first moved. I have a blog where I put like my daily thoughts on, and mainly so my parents could read it and my friends back home could like keep an eye on me without me having to like message everyone, because it was quite tiring. I would just put like a few pictures of my day, or like how I was getting on in work, if I got my work permit card yet, or my personal ID card, and just very silly things, or like what pub I went to that week or that day. And it would be, for me, a good way of looking back. Like, I've achieved quite a lot today. It might not seem like a lot compared to what I'm used to achieving, but actually I've done pretty good. I found my favorite bread in the supermarket. That was a big thing, right? Because supermarkets, when you're living in the country,
yeah.
I found that you spend 2 hours in a supermarket, not 20 minutes, because you're trying to figure out what brand do you need to buy. And yeah, journaling is a very good thing to do. It's something I've definitely used before, and probably need to go back to doing it more now, even in normal life.
Yeah, it's free. I mean, you did it in a really cool, advanced way, and that's kudos to you. But to anyone who's a beginner, you could also just do it. If that feels too overwhelming to do it in a public way, you could just do it it doesn't have to be, I think a lot of people think like with journaling that because there's a lot of like aesthetically pleasing stuff, it could literally just be like a dollar, thin paper from the, like, it doesn't have to notebook. It doesn't
Be a
have to
sticky
be
note, yeah.
yeah, it just is a way to get things out. Like, so it doesn't need to be fancy.
Yeah, just some legal paper and you're fine.
That's perfect. That's great. Maybe just keep it in a safe place for just you, for just the person, so they don't have to share if they don't want to. But yeah, as long as it can be private if they want it to be.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for your incredible wisdom. And
Thank you.
we'll see you all next time for the Expat Pod.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.